and he would rub my thighs while he was speaking to me. He'd run his hand up and down my leg, put his hand on my lower back. He would ask me personal questions about my marriage. And after going through all of this, I realized that once he found out that I was already a problem with the command, he became more aggressive in his behavior. So him knowing that I was already in trouble and maybe necessarily didn't want to be on the command's radar again, he used that as his advantage, knowing that I would probably be less likely to speak up because I didn't want to get in trouble, right? So I remember one time leaving his office, and he got up quickly and positioned himself between me and the door, and he was like, "You can't leave until you give me a hug."
I like to talk, so go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're good. So I've noticed a difference with a lot of the survivors that I'm dealing with, and just like some of the people that I'm advocating for, the lack of taking responsibility is,
man, it's
when I was in, I remember there was a lot of times where I had to suck my pride up and just be kind of like, "Yep, it's my fault," and move forward. There's not a lot of that anymore. Yeah.
No, they don't do that anymore. So it's just
no.
I know it's across. It's the same across the board for all the military, but they just don't do it at all. I've noticed how I will try to just be like in the old kind of back in my day, it was if something happened and if you had a role to play in it, and you messed up, you acknowledged that you messed up and you say, dang, and you were kind of hard on yourself because you wanted to do better, you wanted to be better, you wanted to show your leaders that you had what it takes to start stepping into that role of being a leader. Nowadays, most of the soldiers I deal with, they think they walk in with the mindset of I've already arrived, and so I deserve that promotion. You need to give me that promotion. If you don't give it to me, or if you don't give me those accolades, well, then it means you have something against me and you don't want me to succeed. So therefore, I need to get you before you get me. And it's no, you just got to want to be here, right? It's not about the money. It is kind of, but it's not about there's responsibilities that come with it. Oh, I could talk about this all day because I freaking...
Yeah, I know. It's hard. They're getting harder to lead.
Dealing with soldiers.
Yeah, they're getting a lot harder to lead.
Yes. Yes.
I have my Lightroom kept popping up, and I'm trying to just close it because I'll look at that the whole time. The little things jumping.
You're good.
Yeah. Okay.
Lightroom.
Where are you?
I love Lightroom / hate it. I love presets, but I don't like presets at the same time. So it's a pain in the butt. But anyway, I'm sorry, totally off. Kind of on subject, but off subject.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm getting ready to kind of leave that life behind me a little bit. So,
well, we're gonna talk about it. I promise.
Yeah. Okay. I live on a farm and I live out in the middle of nowhere, so gotta just make sure my internet is on the right one.
Well, I am jealous then, because I would love to live on a farm. And what do you? Sorry, random question. Then, who do you use for internet when you're living on a farm?
Charter.
I don't even know what that is. Okay, so then I'm gonna
ask. The only one available.
Where do you live?
There's only 2 towns in the whole U.S. that have the before. I think there's one in Virginia or something, but this is the end of the Oregon Trail. I live so I live on the Columbia River, and across the river you can see Washington.
I care about 4 seasons. Does Oregon get 4 seasons or no?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Hey, you live on the bottom line. Look, I heard Utah was nice. I've never heard Oregon being the place. but I'm gonna have to do some Zillowing later to figure out
depends on
what's
who
in
you
order.
hang out with, because I don't know. It's beautiful. I actually live in a high desert elevation, so I have 300 days of sun.
Okay. Well, what we talking? We talking like 100-degree weather here, or we?
In the summer can get up to like 110 for a couple weeks. But yeah, it'll get pretty hot. I mean, that's pretty rare for it to be up that high, and if it is, it's like it wouldn't last very long. But winter time, we get snow.
Do you?
Which I freaking love. Yeah, and we're kind of waiting on it right now. The mountain's getting dumped on. They opened the lifts like 2 days ago. And my husband, he snowboards with all three of my sons. My youngest is 4. Dang it. There we go. So my youngest is 4, and he's snowboarding. He started snowboarding at 3, and then my older boys are 8.
3.
Yeah, and my older boys are 8 and 10, and they go off the lift by themselves already now. It's pretty badass. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, kids are doing some cool stuff. My daughter would be like, "Dad, I'm not doing that." I'm like, "Why not?"
Dude, my 8-year-old drives my tractor. Like,
see, it's just a different lifestyle when you live on a farm, and you like, danger is like, you're like, "Hey man, this is your world. Go live it." And come back if you're missing something. Like, if you're missing a limb, definitely come back. But if you're not, there's some water outside. We got a well.
Well, we live on a creek. We have actually a covered bridge to our house. And we live on a creek, and there's crawdads, and they play in there all summertime.
See, I'm very jealous of your lifestyle.
They're a little feral.
But very jealous of your lifestyle, right? That is something I definitely wish I could live right there. Maybe one day, maybe if it's in the Lord's plans. But as of right now, San Antonio, the city it is, where I'm down the street from a Target that I despise. So it's all good. You know, my wife loves Target. Me, on the other hand, no.
I'm jealous. I have an hour and a half to Target.
What's your closest store?
We have stores. We have like grocery stores. You know what Kroger is?
I didn't know. Yeah, I know Kroger. Yeah.
Yeah. So like up here, Kroger's Fred Meyer's.
Okay.
So we have that. We have Grocery Outlet and Safeway. So like 3 grocery stores.
I know Safeway.
Yeah. And then for clothing, we have Maurice's, and then like whatever town boutiques we have.
What the heck is Maurice's?
It's like the white woman, like business class, like so bad. I honestly, if I'm gonna get clothes here in town, I go to Coastal Farm and Ranch.
Oh, okay. So no pantsuits. Got it. All right, cool.
Yeah, little Canadian tuxedos. Yeah.
Well, look, teachers though, when you live on a farm, you gotta wear clothing that's comfortable and fits the scenery. Like, if I showed up to a farm like what I'm wearing right now, I'm telling you, not just because I'm black, but because people would be like, we don't mind, but what brings you out? What brings you to
I went to high school with a black guy who was a hick and wore cowboy boots. Yeah, in Washington.
Man, when I meet someone like that, like because it is rare. It is genuinely rare.
Yeah,
I'm like, hey man, you're so cool. So but it's just like this like I don't know how to explain it. They're genuine. That's a genuine person right there. Like, I can look at that man and be like, you're a genuine person. I don't know you, but I just know you're a genuine person. Everything about you.
I love people that you can't put into boxes.
Yeah. Like, just you're just like, I don't know what it is. You're awesome. I'm gonna like this. So
I like that.
That being said, I know we've been talking for forever, and it's totally my fault because I love to talk.
Okay. Me too.
But hey guys, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads, where being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre. I mess up my intro. It's because it's totally out of sync now. You guys get it. mediocre. Don't do it. Got it. You understand it. I'll get it right at the end. I promise. So my name is Quad. I go by Q, of course. Joined by a very special guest named Meghan. I've been looking forward to this one. And it's funny. I actually, before I reached out to you, I had considered reaching out to you before that.
Oh,
and I
wow.
was like, well, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if she'll respond. I don't know. Like, cause I'm very weird. I'm like, I'm not like this big person out there in the space, if you will. And so when I reach out to people, I'm like, I get intimidated by follower account. I'm not going to lie. When someone's like, hey man, I got 10,000 plus followers. I just reached 1,000, but hey, we're going for it. Hey, do you want to come on my, and I'm so, it's just amazing because there's a lot of good people out there, and they respond, and they're like, absolutely, would love to come to the show. And I'm like, that's freaking awesome. I can't wait. And so when you did respond, I told my wife, I was like, hey, I'm gonna have this girl on, and I was like, this is crazy. I was showing her Instagram and everything.
Yeah.
And then she goes, that's gonna sounds like a crazy conversation. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be dope. I'm super excited. And my ADHD is like off the wall because I'm like, I was like, I can't wait for the conversation. The terrible part is I understand people's schedules are like jam packed. And so like I send my calendar link out and I wait, and then for some people I see it, I'm like, oh, I get to talk to you in like 2 weeks. Heck yeah, it's fine. If there was anything sooner, let me know. But I can wait. I promise. I have patience. I know what that looks like. But no, I was super excited to have you on. So most of the audience, they probably heard us chit chat for a while, so it's great. This is actually how I wanted to what I intended with my podcast, where it's just a good flowing conversation with the person, whoever I was talking to. But I don't want to ruin the mood, but I unfortunately I think I'm going to. So
that's what I'm here for.
No, we're here for a good time. We're not here to ruin the mood. So it's just, guys, don't worry. I promise. All this laughing, it's good. It's good. It makes for a good episode. Also, it doesn't make it feel like it's just an hour of just sadness the entire time.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it sounds so terrible when I say it. That
I know. I've been through some messed stuff.
She's basically got a messed up life, and she's here to tell you guys her messed up life. For the internet to hear. So, without further ado, Meghan, please tell us about your messed up life.
My gosh, it's so funny because I just don't do well with like negativity. And sadness and anger. Like, anger is such an uncomfortable feeling for me. I've learned that. And through this whole process, people are like, why are you mad? I'm like, I'm just not mad. Like, I don't know. And then I have these little spurts where I'm like, really mad. Like, it kind of comes in waves, and I've chosen to like feel more of that anger recently, but like I don't sit in it. And I guess I'll kind of get into my story because you can kind of see where it changes and where my mindset changes, and the way that God kind of like worked through my life and has really helped me change. Like, these things that have happened to me, I didn't deserve, and they really suck. But God has really helped me form a mindset of taking that bad thing and transforming it into something pretty and beautiful that I can continue to help other people with. And I think finding positivity and finding confidence in it has been a huge thing for me. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Southwest Washington. My dad was a fireman for 35 years for the city. My mother actually spent her entire career working in hospice care for the VA hospital. So I grew up spending time with my mom at work and visiting her at work, and actually spending a lot of time volunteering with hospice veterans. And I just remember going in and sitting with these guys. Like, I had to sign a HIPAA waiver every time I went in, but I sat with one of the band of brothers and spoke with him. I met a survivor of the Patton Death March. I just met a lot of really incredible people at such a young age. Because, most of our World War II vets are gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd even met, at that point, I think I had met one World War I vet when I was really young.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that really influenced me. All my grandfathers served. My dad served. And my middle brother served. I watched him go into the Navy, and my dad was in the Navy. My dad actually served in the Army for a little bit as well. But the sense of pride that I saw them have in these men, it was something that they were proud of their entire lives. And I remember going like, I really want to feel that way. Like, I want that. I was pretty dependent growing up. I was the baby sister. I did really horrible in school. Like, I barely graduated high school with a 1.4 GPA.
Whoa.
Yeah, but looking back, I was dealing with a lot of trauma. And I dealt with a lot of trauma before the Coast Guard even. Great family, though. I was always plugged into church. I went to church every Sunday. I went to youth group on Wednesdays. I went to Bible studies on Friday mornings before school at like 6:30 in the morning. But there was kind of a culture in the church back then, the purity culture, like purity rings. And I don't really agree with the way they taught it. And it brought a lot of shame on me. It felt very shameful of just like being a curvy woman. I had some church hurt happen. Like, I had a group of girls one time drag me into a room and sit on top of me and lock the door and tell me that I was tempting the boys with my chest and that I looked like a slut. And I was 14 years old, And so I think growing up in that, I just kind of accepted what it was, and it was easier to just kind of like not say anything. I didn't want to deal with the shame of bringing it up. So I went through some trauma through school, and I went through high school, and I was like, I freaking hate school. I hate sitting in class. Did really well in photography class. I was the first class that the teacher ever hung anything up on the board of mine and was like, this is an example. And I was like, whoa, I'm good at something.
That's awesome.
And for those of you that don't know, I have owned my own photography business for 8 years, but I have been photographing since I was 14 years old. So I knew then that I wanted to be a photographer, and that seemed like a pipe dream. So when it came time to graduate, when I barely did, like crawled across the finish line, I went to my dad and I said, I think I'm going to go and get my prerequisites at the community college. And he's like, okay, cool. I can pay for a semester of books. And I was like, I'm not going. Like, I don't want to go enough to put myself into debt. I've never been a person that's like wanted to take out tons of loans. Like, that was always really scary to me. So I'd went through like a bad breakup, went through some trauma. And so I went to the Coast Guard recruiter. Well, actually, I was going to go to the Navy recruiter. And I went home to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm signing up for the Navy. And he's like, have you signed the paper yet? And I was like, no. And he said, okay, do me a favor. This is the only compromise I want to make about it. If you're going to join, go into the Coast Guard. I don't want my only daughter going overseas. I think you're going to be safer in the Coast Guard. And so I said, okay. So I went into the Coast Guard. It was really difficult to get in 2012. That was during the recession time. I had to kind of really work my butt off to get in. Had to take the ASVAB 4 times.
4 times? Oh man.
Four times. I went in and I did pretty freaking bad. I think I got like a 31. Went in and took it again. I did even worse. I got a 29. And so my dad convinced one of the firemen that he worked with to tutor me. And so I would go into the firehouse when my dad was on shift, and this firefighter would tutor me in math. And so he just did a brush up. I went to Barnes and Noble and got a like ASVAB for Dummies books, and we just like went through and I refreshed on everything. And I went in and I got a 75. I went and like more than doubled my score. So then MEPS contacted me and said, we think that you may have cheated on your ASVAB. So we need you to come in and take it a 4th time. And when you come in and take it a 4th time, you have to get in within 5 points of that score, or else we will think that you cheated. So I had to go in and take it a 4th time. Everything I do is always like the difficult route. So
I would like to point out though, who cheats on the ASVAB? Like, who really wants to cheat on the ASVAB that bad where they're like, yes, I'm finally
also,
get
how
to
do
do
you
what I
cheat
want.
on the ASVAB? There's like multiple different tests.
Yes.
And you empty your pockets and you're under a camera. Like, I don't.
Y'all, it's like prison. So when you go into MEPS to take this freaking ASVAB, okay, the one in Phoenix especially, you walk in there and you're in a line, and before you can actually get into the room of the computers, they, like you said, they make you empty all your pockets, and it's almost just shy of like doing a pat down, basically. And
yeah, I mean, you spread your butt cheeks too at that place.
You know, that place is
the same old man who looked up my butt looked up my brother's butt.
You know, like it's so dear. That's the worst part. I would say one of the worst parts of this, because you're just dreading the moment of, you're just like, is this the part I gotta go drop my drawers for the dude? And
they're like, duck walk in my underwear.
And they're like, no, not yet. Piss in the cup first. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, maths was terrible. I hate maths. It was literally, they are lucky I was 19, because if I was older and you would have said, hey, like, this is what you got to go through to get here, I'm like, nah, I'm good, man. It's not worth it for me. I'm good. You can go get somebody else.
Do you want to know what I had to do in MEPS? They tell the girls you need to wear like full coverage underwear. Well, I had forgot and did not wear full coverage underwear. And I was like, they're like, you got to go home. And I'm like, so I found a girl and I was like, listen, can I borrow your underwear? She's like, yeah, I got you. I got an extra pair in my bag. I was like, sweet. That same girl like ended up being my bunkmate in boot camp all 8 weeks.
Oh, that's nice. Dope.
Yeah, she ended up in my wedding. So
what? Oh, well, see, what you know? Look at her. We shared underwear. There's a bond that you cannot break, man. Oh, I'll tell y'all, I hate but I really did hate MEPS. I hated every bit of MEPS. But the whole point of that, when you take the ASVAB, like, there's no, I don't know or understand how anybody could cheat, because like there's the person in the very back, or at least for us, he watches you, and then he has his own computer and he can go through every computer to see what you're on. But it's not like you can leave the screen unless you're tech savvy. But me, I was not, and so like I'm just like clicking. Yeah. I'm like,
it's just like a multiple choice, like super boring gray test. Yeah.
So
so I proved myself to my recruiters that I deserved a boot camp date, because the Coast Guard was only putting about 65 people through every 3 weeks during that time. Yes.
The Army would hate that.
One company every 3 weeks. So if you were reverted, you had to wait 3 weeks in this like horrible place and do everybody's laundry, and then re-enter a boot camp company at that week that you left the other one in.
Oh, man.
So there was people that got reverted, and I'm like, that freaking sucks. But I went through boot camp, and it was a really rewarding experience for me. My instructors were great. I had a female instructor. We were her first company, and they had kind of picked up on that I had some trauma prior to enlisting. and they all like bound together. Like she found me in the bathroom. Like there was one point I was like curled up on a ball and I wasn't speaking to anybody. And it was because it was the 1-year anniversary of me being raped prior to the Coast Guard. And she looked me in the face and was like, listen, you are going to graduate boot camp. You are going to overcome this. You are going to move forward and you're not going to allow these people to take anything else from you. And I said, okay. And like that right there, I'm so grateful that they chose to invest in me instead of kicking me out, because that moment right there, I became a survivor and someone who was like, you know what? She's right. I am going to continue to overcome and become a better version of myself, because that is how I get back at these people.
Yeah.
And I'm just really grateful. That was like a major turning point in my life. So I graduated. They stuck me at an isolated unit on an Indian reservation. So it was a small boat station. There was 15 people a shift. We worked 48-hour slides. It was a search and rescue unit. And there was 30 people for the whole unit, but like there was only 15 in your shift. And it was one long hallway. And my barracks room was at the end of the hallway. So like even on my days off, I was woken up by the pipes, you know, and
yeah.
I shouldn't have ever actually been stationed there. I found out with them having the knowledge that I would need mental health care, like therapy. They shouldn't have stuck me at an isolated unit because I didn't have access to getting care that I needed. I started, every time I would go underway, like my joints would swell, like my knees would turn purple. I didn't really understand what was happening to me. And I just was so embarrassed and humiliated because I was not a useful tool for them. Like I was not a useful member of the team. I kept my mouth shut for a while. But then like they would see me icing my knees when we got back. They spread rumors about me. Like one guy spread that I lied about my flat feet. And he was about 3 ranks above me, and he's the person who like divvied out my jobs every day. And he was just a weird guy. But like I remember I was like, hey BM2. I was like, you talking about me to people? And he's like, well, I just said, and I was like, I want you to keep my damn name out of your mouth. I was like, do not ever talk about me. Do not talk about my medical stuff that you have no idea about. I don't want to hear my effing name come out of your mouth again. I said, mind your own fucking business. And he was like, oh, like I had never stuck up for myself at that point.
Yeah.
And I just was like, you get to that time where you're like, okay, I can either just like suck this up and like just keep my head down, or I'm gonna start sticking up for myself.
Yeah. Because it's hard. It's hard to stick up for yourself, especially when someone's higher ranking than you. And like you have you have to like you want to address it, and it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to do because you're still trying to learn how the overall organization works, and then to have someone like that do that, and you have to stick up for yourself. You're like, how do I do this? What do I say? And if I do say anything, what are the potential ramifications? And so it's difficult.
Yeah, like, and you have to be respectful too. I mean, that probably wasn't respectful, but that guy had done so many things at that point that I was like, I'm done. Like, when I would go to get qualified, he would insist on being in my boards, and then he would ask me outdated questions that I was never taught to like.
Oh my gosh.
So much so that they had to kick him out of my board once. And I'm like, why? Like, why? Why are you doing this? I'm 19 years old. So it was such an awkward place to be. And I was, processing a lot of what had happened to me prior. So one day I go in And my warrant officer, my CO, she calls me into her office and she's like, hey, so do you want to be in the Coast Guard? And I said, yeah, yes, ma'am. Like, this is where I want to be. And she's like, are you sure? Like, is this actually what you want to do? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to be here. And she's like, okay, well, we're going to transfer you to the air station. It was about like an hour and a half, 2 hours away. And she goes, I know you're set to marry your husband. This way you can move out of the barracks. You guys can get a house together. And you can have access to mental health care and physical therapy. And we're going to send you TDY, so temporary, to the other unit, and you can work there. And then if you heal and get better, you're going to come back and join us. And I said, okay. So they send me to this unit. I'm really excited. I am finally plugged into therapy. I'm starting to process all of that. I marry my husband. We're 19 years old. We dated for 11 months, got engaged. We were married 2 months later.
Was he in the Coast Guard too?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I actually met him in high school.
No.
We did not date in high school. I met him after my assaults. Went through a really bad period. He walked into a party and I was taking shots of Jack Daniels and he had me water in a coffee mug and then never put a move on me and never asked for my number. And so I was like,
what a hero. I like him already.
He's good.
Take some coffee, take some water. You need it more than I do.
Yeah, he's a really good guy. Yeah, I don't honestly, I have no idea where I would be without him and his support and
That's
just
awesome.
Being a sounding board for 13 years now. Reassuring me that like these things are wrong. So I get into therapy, get married, report to this new unit, and within the first day or two I meet the man who would continue to groom me over the next 4 months. He was in his late 50s. I was 19. But before I get into all that, I'll tell you what happened when I got to that unit. So that week, I start working in the storekeeper, the SK shop, for all the purchasing. And I like it. I like the people in there. My second, she's like a sister to me. I mean, she still calls me every 6 months to like check in on me and make sure I'm okay. And I get called into lieutenant commander's office with my warrant officer and my command master chief. And I'm like, okay, like I was really nervous. I'm brand new. I've been in the Coast Guard all of 4 months at this point. And my last unit, I was a problem. So my plan at this unit was to like just keep my head down and like not be an issue. So I sit down and I've got my warrant and my master chief and then the lieutenant commander across from me. And they're all standing there and he takes this piece of paper and it says memorandum at the top. He slides it across the desk and it says intent to discharge for fraudulent enlistment.
Cool.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, so I want you to go home. He reads it to me and I'm just like shaking, like, okay. And he goes, I want you to go home. I want you to read this over. I'll have you in my office tomorrow. You're going to sign it and we'll have you processed out and home in about 30 days. It's not a big deal, And I was like, okay. And I leave and there was a master chief standing next to me. He was filling in for my original master chief because he was gone. And he takes me to this like covered seating area and he sits with me and I just like start crying. I'm like, Master Chief, what do I do? And this guy was like, he is my enlisted like advocate. Like he's supposed to put his neck. He's like, like it's not a big deal. I mean, you can still move forward. It says here that they're going to recommend an honorable discharge, but underneath it said, but we can't guarantee it. And I was like, no, like I didn't lie about my flat feet. I remember in MEPS, you cannot hide that you have flat feet.
Yeah. They make you walk. They make you walk back and forth, and they check your feet, and they do all they do all these things for a reason. So like,
yeah.
Oh my God.
So I remember he checked, and then he was like, all right, I'm going to sign off on it. You're fine. I was like, okay. So, I went to my girlfriend in my shop, who's like my sister, and I'm just like, they want to kick me out for fraudulent enlistment. She's like, what? This is insane. I'm like, I know. So, she knew a chief on base who'd kind of been screwed over by the same command. And she's like, I'm going to bring you to him. He's going to help you. Like, you can trust this guy. And so he kind of, he taught me how to protect myself. But when I walked in there, he's like, she kind of gives him the down low. She's like, all right, I'm going to leave. And I'm like, okay. And he looks at me and he goes, are you a liar? And I said, no, Chief, I'm not a liar. He goes, are you a liar? And I said, no, Chief, I didn't lie. I am not a liar. And he's like, okay, I'll help you. And so he gave me the number to a JAG. Do you know what a JAG is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Judge, advocate. What's the G?
I don't know. I
something.
I just know what they do.
Yeah.
But,
the lawyers. They're the legal people.
Yeah. So it was a Navy JAG. So it was an unbiased lawyer. I think he was over in Silverdale or Bremerton. But I called him and he's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to help you out. We're going to figure this out. Super cool guy. He got a hold of all of my MEPS paperwork and he found where the doctor had wrote abnormal flat feet and then checked fit for full duty. So we highlighted that. He wrote up this thing, but I also called my dad and I was like, Dad, this is really bad. Like, I just remember crying, like, I don't want to do this. Like, can you please come help me? Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'd been under my dad's roof this whole time. And I just remember my dad going like, Megan, I can't help you. You have to do this on your own. You are going to have to fight for yourself. And I was like, okay. He goes, there is something I can do. But he's like, I can't go there and fight your battle for you. But what I can do is I can call a congresswoman. And I was like, okay. He's like, but if I do that, you got to keep your mouth shut and not tell anybody that you did. Because even though it's every military member's right to be able to call a congressman, as you probably know, if they find out that you did, I mean, you're going to be labeled a snitch. Like, they're not going to be happy. Mm-hmm. But I weighed my options, and I'm like, if I get kicked out under a freaking general discharge, that's going to follow me around for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And, like, let me remind all of you, during this time, while I'm fighting this, I'm being groomed by an older person on base. So here I am, just this issue. The Congress lady ended up calling Coast Guard headquarters and said, I found out that you're trying to kick one of your members out under false pretenses. And if you continue forward with this, we're going to bring it public. And the Coast Guard went, whoa. Like, no, we don't want to do that, because they knew that the charges they had on me were bullshit. So they dropped them. Nobody ever came and let me know, but like, I knew because I'd been in contact with the congressman's office or the congresswoman's office. So I just kind of sat there, and I sat there for weeks waiting for somebody to come talk to me. And I had signed the paper, but I had denied the charges. So we were waiting for the next step. But I had known that I'd won, and so I just kind of sat there. And my warrant officer, there was something about him that just didn't sit well with me. He told me that I could trust him with anything, and that I could tell him whatever, and if I had any questions, but I just did not trust this man, and I decided to kind of follow my gut. So I just learned how to play the politics, and so I'm went and told him things that weren't incriminating to me, so that he continued to believe that I was trusting him. Well, I went to the clinic one day because I had to have a check-in for my mental health. And so I told my HS what I had done. And he's like, "You did what?" No, I was like, "I called a congresswoman so I wouldn't get kicked out." And he's like, "Oh my God." He's like, "Good for you." He must have went and said something to someone because I went back to my shop, and within an hour or two, my warrant officer came up, and he just like, we were in a big warehouse and we all sat in a circle, and he came over and just slammed his fists down on my table and was like, "You stupid, immature little girl. Like, how dare you? I told you this wasn't a big deal and you went and called a congresswoman." He goes, "This was not a big deal." And I'm like, "If it wasn't a big deal, sir, then why are you freaking out?" And
right?
yeah, and I just remember like going, "Oh no, like, cat's out of the bag." So the man who was grooming me was an IT worker. Um, and I had to go into his office to get like my profile set up. And like, if it broke down, I'd have to go into his office. Like, my first class, she was friends with him, and she would send me on errands to go grab like any IT related anything. Um, this man was very nice to me. He was pretty well liked. He had served 26 years in the Coast Guard. And then he retired and became a contract worker. So he's now receiving double retirement. So that's super fun. Yeah, but he he would have me in his office, and he would shut the office door. And it was like a cinder block room and on a hallway, and there was no windows other than the window on the door, and he would have the blinds drawn. And I was young, but like now as a married woman, like, you would never have a woman in your
Nope.
office with the door closed alone. Like, that's just, you don't do that. It's
If I
just
have a
not.
soldier in my office, there is another non-commissioned officer in that office with me to ensure that there are no shenanigans going on and everything is
Exactly.
said is above board.
Yes, and it
Yeah.
protects you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it protects all parties. So, um, that was kind of odd for me because he had a desk that faced the door. Um, I had grown up like spending time with my dad and the firefighters. I had 200 extra uncles that always had my back. I was used to spending time with older people and having that camaraderie and having it be genuine and innocent. Um, he started it was uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
like his desk faced the door, and then he had a second desk set up that was facing the wall next to him. So like you were both in this corner, right? So like I would be sitting next to him facing the wall, but
Mm-hmm.
he would come over and help me with my profile, and he would rub my thighs while he was speaking to me. He'd run his hand up and down my leg, put his hand on my lower back. He would ask me personal questions about my marriage. Um, and after going through all of this, I realized that um, once he found out that I was already a problem with the command, he became more aggressive in his behavior. So him knowing that I was already in trouble and maybe necessarily didn't want to be on the command's radar again, um, he used that as his advantage, knowing that I would probably be less likely to speak up because I didn't want to get in trouble, right?
Okay.
So um, I remember one time leaving his office, and he got up quickly and positioned himself between me and the door, and he was like, "You can't leave until like you give me a hug. Like, I helped you, so you have to give me a hug." And I just remember going, "Oh shit. Like, no, like I don't again." if I just stand there and let him do it, he's going to let me leave. It's better than making things awkward. So I just remember like standing there and him squeezing me and like running his hands up and down my arms and just kind of like pressing his head into me, like putting his mouth next to my ear and just like pressing his body, just hugging me for a very long time while he touched me. And eventually let go. And then, you know, he would always walk me back to the office because he was such a gentleman. And he would be, when we'd be behind the buildings, he'd put his hand on my lower back, like right above my butt. Again, like, this is a 50-something-year-old man, and I am still a teenager. So I just didn't process what was currently happening to me. And even a decade ago, like, grooming wasn't really even a thing that was known. Like, we didn't even have a word for that. So like, I wasn't really, he was very he's very intelligent, and it was always teetering on this line. Like, was that really something? Like, it was always like, you know, until he came into my office one day and I was getting ready to leave, and I was going to go spend the afternoon with my husband because he traveled at the time. He was gone for 6 weeks at a time, and then he'd come home for a week. So I remember I changed into my civvies at the end of the day, and that man was there, and I was leaving, and he was like, "Hey, Megan." I was like, "Bye, like, have a good day." And I left. Well, he came in the next day, and he came up behind me at my desk, and like leaned over my shoulder, and he was pretending to help me on my computer. So like everybody else in the warehouse looking over, he was helping me on my computer. He gets up right next to my ear, and he says to me, "I didn't realize you had such a body under your uniform. I didn't realize you had such a big butt." He's like, "Wow." And I'm like, "Okay, like, haha, like, please get away," you know, like, just kind of, like, please, you know. But I just remember, like, looking around at everybody, like, nobody saw it, like, nobody thought anything of it. And I just constantly continued to try and avoid this person, and pretend that like this wasn't happening to me. And so I was also getting sexually harassed by my prior first class at my last unit. He was sending me text messages. He was wanting me to come to his house to feed his dog, and I was friends with his wife, and she was at A school, and I agreed because he was going to be gone. But like, he's like, "There'll be something in it for you. How about you come over to my house and we'll watch movies and like have some drinks together. I'll make you dinner." And I was like, so I like was sending these like texts to my husband, like, what, you know, like, again, this person's 3 ranks above me, knowing I'm underage, and he's like, "Don't agree to anything." But it's like, when they do that kind of stuff to you, that puts you in such a bad position, because if I were to be rude to him and yell at him and put him in his place, like, that's the person who's in charge of all my leave and my daily jobs. So it's like, I can't offend that person. They know they have that over you. And so I just kind of like ignored it. I'm like, "Wait, we'll see," you know. And then he sent me a picture of a coupon. It said, "For one instance of you saying something perverted to me that I won't report to HR." And I was like, okay, like, freaking cool. So like, what more? And I just continued to shovel this stuff down because I was still currently in therapy, and I was processing what had happened to me before I'd even entered. And so I just pretended like nothing was happening. And at one point I asked my first class, I had told her, I'm like, "I don't want to go back to that unit. Like, I really don't feel safe there." And she's like, "Let's go talk to Master Chief." And so she brought me up to Master Chief's office, and he was my command Master Chief. And she's like, "Tell him what you told me." And I said, "Master Chief, I do not feel safe returning to that unit. I feel like there will be retaliation against me. I do not feel safe returning there. And he said, okay. And he was leaning on his desk. He gets up and he starts walking towards me. He goes, Seaman Klement, I am here to give you a reality check. If Nia Bay needs our support, then Nia Bay is where you're going to go. And I just said, okay, yes, Master Chief. And I got up and I remember leaving that office and going like nobody is listening to me. Like nobody is trying to find out like why I don't want to be in these places.
Yeah.
And that was just like devastating because I just felt like I was at the mercy of these people who didn't give a crap about me. And I knew that if I went back there that I was going to be put into a situation again. And so my shop went out to lunch one day, and the man who was grooming me came along, and he made it so he like sat by me and he was laughing at everything I said, and he was just so in tune with what I was saying. And one of my coworkers, he noticed what was going on, and he was making him so upset that he actually left the lunch early. And so when I got back to the shop, he called me back and he was like, Klement, what is going on? And I was like, nothing's going on. And he's like, no, I've seen this behavior before. What is going on? And I just like unloaded. And he went to my first class. He's like, go back to your desk. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to help you. And I'm like, okay. So he goes to my first class, and she was like bowling buddies with my perpetrator. So instead of reporting him, she went straight to him. So he just like, every time he saw me after that, he acted like he was completely disgusted with me and like looking down his nose at me, shaking his head at me. Just like, I felt just like wow, like I'm an issue again, you know, like I felt bad. And I'm like, well, maybe it really wasn't anything. Like maybe I made it into something it wasn't. And, but she should have, went and reported it, and something should have happened. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I came into work one day, and my warrant officer, that man who had yelled at me, he goes, Klement, I want to talk to you outside. He's got his little cup of tea with his little tea bag, and he's like taking me out behind the warehouse, and he has me follow him to the left and around the side of the building where nobody can see us, nobody can hear us. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I want to ask you a few questions. And I was like, yes, sir. And he's like, did so-and-so shut you in his office and position himself between you and the door? And I said, yes, sir, that happened. And he said, okay. And I pulled out my cell phone and I said, this is also going on. And I showed him the text messages I was getting. He's like, okay. He goes, so I want you to think long and hard about this before you tell anybody else about this. He goes, you could ruin these men's lives, and you could ruin their careers. So before you go and tell anybody else about this, I want you to think long and hard about that. And I was like, okay. And he said, and you know what else is going to happen? And I said, what? And he said, CGIS, Coast Guard Investigative Services, they're going to show up here and they're going to start asking you questions, and they're going to make you out to be a liar. Do you want that to happen? And I said, no, sir, I don't want that to happen. And he said, okay, well, then I want you to think about all of this before you go and tell anybody else. I said, okay. And I just felt so defeated. Like literally, like none of my leaders were protecting me at any capacity. And so I went back into my shop, and I was pretty distraught. And the other non-rate in there, she saw me and she's like, hey, come over here. And she's like, what was that about? What happened? And I told her, and she goes, he said what to you? And so she's like, no, nah, this isn't okay. And so she took me out and took me to a female chief's office, and we all sat on the floor of a locker room, and I just started crying, and I just told her everything. I told her everything that happened. Coast Guard Investigative Services ended up showing up within a couple days, and they brought me into the wardroom. It was like a big long table. That female chief came in, and she sat across the table from me, and then my agents, they both sat to the left of me. They're like, we want you to tell us what happened. And I said, okay. Like, I relinquished my cell phone. I gave them all the messages. And they said, now we want you to take your left hand and we want you to touch your body where this man touched you. And I was like, okay. And I had no legal representation. Mm-hmm. I had no advocate. I had nobody there protecting me, telling me what I could say yes to, what I could say no to. I mean, these were investigators. Like, these were just somebody that you're blindly supposed to trust because they're good people. And so, as I'm sobbing, they have me touching myself. And as I'm touching myself, they said, well, if your hand would have moved up just a little bit higher, or he would have touched your crotch, you would have been sexually assaulted. And I was like, what? And they're like, if you would have just like moved a little higher here, like moved your thumb up a little bit more, that would have been assault. And I was like, and I remember just sobbing so hard that my contact fell out of my eye and onto the table. And like, I remember at this point, like, becoming so frantic, like, no, you don't understand. This man has been touching me unwantedly for 3 or 4 months. Like, I didn't want this, like, he's saying perverted things to me. And they were like, yeah, this just doesn't qualify. And I just, like, again, walked down the same hallway, like, sobbing, like, there is literally nobody here to protect me. And the following days, it just was so bad. Like, I would go home and my husband was gone, and I would lock our doors and I would close all the blinds and I would turn all the lights off because these people knew where I lived. And I lived like 30 minutes from the base. And I had no friends in my town. And my perpetrator lived there. And so I just lived in fear every single day. And I would have to go to work and I would have to see them. And one day I walked out of the clinic and the base is on a spit and there's just like one long sidewalk. And the guy who was my old boss was there, and he just like stood there off the curb, and I had to walk past him. And he just shook his head at me like he was completely disgusted with me. And it's like, after he had found out that I had told somebody, I had originally told my third class what he was saying, and he just didn't have the education then. Super great guy, but we've since had conversations, and he's wonderful. But he went to the guy's wife, and they sent me just these really long text messages about how much of a disgusting person I was, and that he would never be interested in a woman like me, and how ugly I was. And it was so, I felt that immense shame again, and I felt so horrible about myself, and I didn't have anybody. I didn't tell any of my friends what was happening because I thought that I was protecting them, because I was under the impression that if they knew, they would become a part of the investigation and get in trouble. So I was alone. And, there was one time that I felt like I was suicidal and actually thought about how I would kill myself. Mm-hmm. And that is so hard for me to look back on even still. If I didn't have God, if I didn't have my husband, who's to say like what I would have done. Yeah. But after I had run into that man on my base, I stood there And I've explained this. I explained this when I testified in Senate this last August, that like I felt as if I was in the desert and I'm watching the last plane take off. Like, there is nobody coming for me. There is nobody protecting me, and there is nobody helping me get out of here. So at that moment, I said, the only person that's going to protect me is me. And so I walked straight to that female chief's office, and I said to her, you either get me out of the effing Coast Guard or you send me back home. I will not work here anymore. I cannot return here. And she goes, go back to your desk. I'm going to make some phone calls. About an hour later, I get a phone call, and she goes, hey, Portland's close to home, right? And I said, yeah. And she goes, all right, we're cutting you orders. And I went into the yeoman office, and they're like, hey, when do you want your last day to be? I said, I want it to be tomorrow. And I called my husband, and I said, you need to come home. We're moving. And so I left, and we packed up our house, and we moved back home. And that was just so difficult to be a brand new wife, and he'd known all of the trauma that I had been like had happened to me before him, but to then again say, this has been happening to me at work. And it was really difficult to see his response, and the sense of hopelessness that he felt like he couldn't do anything. But we moved, and we moved close to my family and his family. And when I got down to my new unit, there was a female chief there, and she was a new chief. And I'd heard about her. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know her name, but she was the new liaison for the E3s on base. That was her job, was to kind of just like be their advocate and be their mentor and like check in with us and do things with us. And so I'd been there not very long, and she was on base, and we had this meeting in the mess, the chief's mess. And so I walk in there, and she turns around and she looks at me, and she goes, what the hell are you doing here? And it was actually one of the people who worked in the recruiting office that I went through.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she's one of my best friends still to this day. But I was like, Chief, like, I swear, like, I am not in trouble. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. And she's like, yeah, okay, we're going to talk later. And I was like, okay. So she ends up coming and finding me, and she says, like, what happened? Like, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm not allowed to tell you that. She goes, what? She said, who told you that? I said, well, when I left my base, my XO and my master chief, when I was doing my checkout, they said, hey, we think it's a good idea that you don't tell anybody about what happened to you up here, because we don't want it to ruin your reputation. So she's like, no, like, tell me everything. And so I said, okay. And so I told her everything, and she was so mad, like steam coming out of her ears mad. And it was the first time that somebody was like mad enough to help me. And she brought me into my CO's office, my captain's office, super amazing Christian man, like, praise the Lord, I got put under him. She goes, I want you to tell Captain what happened to you. Like, you don't have to tell him anything you don't want to, but like, let him know what went on. And so I just remember sitting there like, do I tell another person? Chief seems to care, so maybe like these people will be different. And so I said, okay. And I just sat there, and I told Captain everything, and he had tears rolling down his face. And I just remember him looking at me going, I have a daughter your age. And he's like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to advocate for you. And he did. He tried for like 2 years. Nothing ever happened.
Nothing ever happened to any of them?
No. At one point, I came on base and like there was a ton of E9s there. Like the E9 of my district was there. Like the E9 from my sector was there. Tons of Master Chiefs, right? And one of them pulled me aside, my sector Master Chief, and he's like, "Hey, Klement, I want to speak to you." And I was like, "Okay." And he brings me into this office and he goes, "Hey, so I got something to tell you." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "Everybody on base thinks that we are here for a base tour. But the Pac West Admiral heard your story and has sent the Pac West Master Chief here to hear you." And I was like, whoa, okay. And so, like, looking back, I don't know how genuine that actually was. I almost wonder if they did that to kind of fluff my feathers to make me feel like they were doing something and that they cared, because at that point in time, I was making phone calls. Like, once I had a chief and a captain that were standing behind me, like, I just started fighting. Like, hey, what's going on with this case? Like, they never, ever could give me any updates. Nobody ever called me to give me updates. And they're like, your investigation's still open. Your investigation's still open. They told me that for 2 years.
Oh, gosh.
And I actually have a copy of my investigation now. They closed my investigation 2 months later. So that's cool. They gaslit me for 2 years. But that day when all those Master Chiefs were there, my sector Master Chief said, the D13, so all of the Pacific Northwest Master Chief, wants to meet with you. And I said, okay. And so later that afternoon, I had a meeting with him. It was him, my command chief for the base, and my station chief. It was a female. And I'm in this room with them, and he's sitting just to the left of me. She's behind him, and then my command chief's like leaning up against the wall next to me. And I'm like, okay. This man says, hey, so I looked over your paperwork, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that BM1 can't make chief. And I said, well, what are you going to do about the civilian? And he said, well, he goes, I don't know if you know this or not, but you weren't actually assaulted. And I said,
okay. All right.
I said, what? He goes, you weren't actually assaulted. I don't know if you know that or not. I said, excuse me, Master Chief. I said, this man touched me for 3 or 4 months, and I didn't want him to. He's like, yeah, but it only classifies as harassment. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. You're wrong. And he's like, well, there's nothing I can do because he's a civilian. My hands are tied. I can't do anything to him. And I just like, I looked at my command chief, and he's just not sticking his neck out for me. And I'm like, okay. He's like, well, is there anything else I can do for you? Or no, before that, I said, you know what, Master Chief? I said, this man has done it before. The difference is that I'm the first one to report him. And I said, and now he's going to do it again. But the difference when he does it again is it's going to be on your hands. And I hope that you can live with that. And he just was like, I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, no, that is the moment where I was like, I don't care anymore. Like, the Coast Guard doesn't care about me, so why should I care?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, is there anything else I can do for you? I said, yeah, you know what, Master Chief, there is something you can do for me. And he's like, what is it? I said, you can award me one of your challenge coins so that I can show my father I stuck up for myself. And he looks at my command chief and he said, go get the one I gave to you.
That's awesome.
And so my command chief goes and gets the one that he was awarded by this guy.
Gosh dang.
And I stood in front of the D13 Master Chief. And I held my hand out like this. He's like, no, you got to shake my hand. And I was like, oh, okay. I shook it and I was like, have a very nice day. And I still have that challenge coin. But that man became the Master Chief Petty Officer of the entire Coast Guard. That man who did not stick up for me became the highest enlisted member in the entire Coast Guard after that.
The military, it seems a constant things of people just failing upwards, and it's atrocious. I will say that I am appalled and baffled and just in shock, in complete shock, for all the things that happened to you, and I'm sorry that those things happened to you, because those things shouldn't have happened to you, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to say these things at all.
Yeah.
But when we join the military, when we put the uniform on, and we think we have this in our mind, we're joining an organizations that have values superior than most, where their moral compass is impenetrable. Like you can't deviate that thing at all.
Yes.
And then you join, and then you're a part of it for a while, and you realize that's a complete load of crap. It's a complete load of crap. It's the ones in that you thought what made up the military and what made the military strong are few far in between, or they're especially on their way out when you're coming in, and it's defeating. It's very, very defeating. I have and never in a million years would I had imagined men, right, grown men who have families, who have kids, and who have people that rely on them to take care of them, protect them. What they refuse to take care of somebody that was asking for help, and that's the hard part for me as a man, and it's rough to listen to, because my oldest is 6, my youngest is 2. And I used to believe that I wanted my daughters, or my kids, ultimately my daughters now, but my kids, to join the military. And after being in for 11 years now, I would tell you that my girls will never join the military as long as I am breathing and walking this earth. There is nothing I will do. I will pay for them to be a doctor, and I will give every bit of my body if I have to for them to reach that goal. No, you don't need the military. No, you don't need the federal government. You don't need these. You don't need them. These things are full of. It's a fester full of weak leaders and wicked people, like generally wicked people.
Selfish people who are out for their careers instead of out for doing better for their people.
What's so crazy to me is, I've lived it as not to the extreme that you have, but I've lived it as well, as when you get labels, the bad soldier, or the bad coast, but I don't know what they call you guys, Coast Guard, coasties. Okay.
Yeah.
When you get labeled bad coastie, right, like that sticks, right? Like then if the right person, and 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, usually it's the right person, says it, it makes it up in their mind that you are what that person says you are. And
absolutely. Yeah.
To fight and claw back from that it's like damn near impossible, because as long as that person's still there, there's nothing that you could do that will ever be good enough to ever get out of that shadow of being the bad coastie or the bad soldier. And so it's frustrating, because when you sit there and you're like, I didn't do anything wrong. I spoke up. I did what we have all these posters around. If you ever go to a military base, guys, and you're out there, like if you're new to the military or whatever, there's these posters around, see something, say something. For the Army, it's called SHARP, Sexual Harassment Assault Response Program. We have, you know, like all these, there's in the, I know the Navy has something different, Air Force has something different, and the Marines have something different. They all have something, but it's more or less, they kind of serve a similar purpose, right? And there are all these things of like, hey, you know, we're here to help soldiers, we're here to help people, we're here to help. And then when you utilize them, it's a beratement of, well, what did that really happen? Or are you just here to make it up? And what did you do to egg him on? And what did you do to stop him? Right? Because now it's clear it's probably like, did it start consensual and then it ended that way? So you just want to get back at him. And it's like, you're like, I'm here telling you something terrible happened to me that I have to keep reliving. And
the percentage of people who actually lie about it is so incredibly low. Yes. But again, that is the same question that people ask me. Well, do you think some of these people, you know, are just spiteful and want to get back at this person, blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, I'm sure that's happened. Yeah, that's happened. But the vast majority of the people who are desperate enough to go forward are telling the truth.
I tell people, so I had a leader who was in charge of me, and I switched it was into my new MOS.
Yeah.
And he was a person that would say very, very inappropriate things. Like, I'm talking off the wall inappropriate things. And it got to the point where me and my partner, we got our evals and we both read them. And we were in Poland and it happened to be on a Sunday when we were reading them. And I looked at her and I turned around and I said, hey, you know what? I've had enough of this. I said, I've had enough of just waiting to leave Poland just so I don't have to be under him, just so I can be done with him, and just because I have to suck it up. And I said, I sat here and listened to this man use the N-word continuously. I sat here and listened to this man talk about the sex acts that he likes to do, and smile in my face as if it's no big deal, and says, but the doctor says like I'm messed up in the brain, and like as if that's an excuse. And I have to just sit here and listen to that. And my partner has to sit there and listen to that. And
so you have to be subjected to that garbage.
Yeah. And so like we sent this email to our chief, and he like immediately came down and all these things. And, you know, they came down with this brevity of like, hey, we're here to help. We're here to take care of you. But then as everything was coming out come fruition, finding everything out, it was this isolating thing. Everyone started isolating me. Everyone started, you know, wanting to be around him, but not wanting to be around me. And it was to the point where I didn't know who I could trust. And you're just frustrated because you're like, I did the right thing. I did the thing. I did what we're taught to do. We're supposed to
now look at
and it's like, it's not even worth it. You know, I'll never forget this. I had my company commander, and I remember we did what are they called? The surveys we do for the command teams and all that, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, I put in there a lot of what happened, and so she knew it was me right off the bat reading some of those answers.
Yeah.
And so she goes, and I remember she sat down and she goes, hey, so like, this is you, because I can tell by the answers. I said, yep, that's me. I was like, ma'am, if I could have put my name in there, I would have. I wanted to let everyone know, screaming from the rooftops. And she goes, you put something in here that I have to ask you about. And she goes, you know, you put in here that if you had to do it again, she said, you would never have said anything. I said, 100%. I said, ma'am, from this point on, what the Army has taught me is that if something happens to Queon is just going to figure it out himself and he's going to suck it up. I said, but if something happens to another soldier or something happens to someone else, I said, I'll be there to help and defend and help them as much as I can. I said, but when it came to me, I said, I watched every single person in this organization fail me and isolate me as if I was the cur. But that man who had no problems saying what he was saying, you guys gave him nothing but platitudes, nothing but praise. And I'm supposed to sit here and say and be like, but the system works. And it's so unfortunate. Right? It's unfortunate. You know, I tell you, so now where I am at my life, I tell people all the time, you know, if there is something like that, I remember there's I won't put all of her business, but more or less, a soldier was doing what filling up her leg or whatever the case might be, and she outranks him, but still he felt comfortable to do it, and she told him to stop, and he turns around and looks at her and he goes, "What? No." And he keeps going, and she didn't know, and she was like powerless. And so I remember her telling me the story, and I when we're standing there, and I said, "When did this happen?" And she was like, "This was like a couple weeks ago." I said, "You need to tell someone now." I said, "I'll go with you. I'll go with you." I said, "And the next time," I said, "I'm telling you right now, because if I see this dude," I said, "I'll put my hands on him. I'll put my hands on him." I was like, there is no reason a man should anyone should do that. And she was like, she goes, "It's okay." That same day, that very day, she went and she told our commander, and our commander is a mandatory reporter, and they went through the process, and they found out there was already an open case on this individual for doing something else. And I say all to say, because it gets so frustrating that people had to go through these things. Like, there are people that had to experience these things.
Have had to go through these things.
And they had to keep their mouth shut and say, "Well, this is just the status quo. This is just how it is."
Yep.
And then only to come to find out is like, if I would have known, I could have said something, that there were others who were experiencing it. And it's not to guilt trip people or people into saying like, shame on you for not saying anything, but it's to say like, if that person is doing it to that extreme, you can trust and believe you're probably not the first person they've done that to.
Yeah, actually, after releasing my video on YouTube and it circulated through the Coast Guard, I don't know if you know any of that side of the story, do you?
No.
Okay, so I was actually asked the Coast Guard flew me down to Alameda last March, and they asked if I would be a part of this new project with the Sapper program. And it was a storytellers project, and it's for us to tell our stories and kind of reclaim that power back and just like get it out there, right? And my old chief that advocated for me, she is the one who was like, "You know what? I think you need to talk to this girl." And so she called me up. She's like, "You ready to tell your story?" I was like, "Hell yeah, like, let's go."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was scared. I remember just like taking off on the plane and just like crying. It was like, she drove me onto base the next day, and I was like, like it was scary. Like, I was looking at all the faces, like, am I going to run into somebody, like, because when I left base, I left with my son in the car. He was like 8 or 9 months old. I brought him to work the last day. He was in the back seat. Then we drove to our new town, and I just remember like, this is my new life. Like, moving on from here. So anyways, I'm on this base. I record this, me telling my story, me and 2 of my other friends, and we just like, we kind of all had agreed that this probably wasn't going to get released to the fleet. Our stories did not make the Coast Guard look very good. We all had very many failures from the Coast Guard. Been all failed on such a deep level. But me being out now, I released my story anyways, on YouTube. And that's how I ended up testifying in Senate last August. Anyways, since releasing it, it circulated through the Coastie network. I think it's got like 8,000 views now. But I had multiple women come to me about my perpetrator,
Really?
and saying that they were also groomed by him. And there was one in particular that was groomed by him for quite some time and assaulted, and she reported him before I did. and that same command didn't act on it. And in turn, that left me to get assaulted by him. And they all told me that I was the first report against him. And I also found out when you go to report an assault, you are supposed to be given a form. And I don't know if the Army has this as well, but it's called a 6095. In that form, you state what happened to you and where you want your investigation to go.
Yeah.
And in turn, that form is what is put into the system that keeps track of all the assaults that have happened. It is also the paper that gets you your VA benefits for military sexual trauma. Lo and behold, I find out through this whole process and going through my Senate thing, they were looking into everything. I never was given a 6095. That is not present in my record. So in turn, that means that my assault was never documented because the Coast Guard never recognized me as an assault victim. That was pretty, I probably knew that happened, but that was also very devastating to find out. I've done so much work on my mental health, and I have actually had to receive years of internal physical therapy. But finding out things like that make me really sad for 19-year-old me who had nobody there to defend her or protect her. And that just so many people just pushed me aside. And so now I actually am creating the first peer support group by enlisted members within the Coast Guard. So I'm starting an organization called Safe Waters, and it's going to be really channeled at reaching these enlisted members, because mostly everything that they have to some capacity is officer ran. So I'm starting it with 3 current active duty members. So I can't wait to share more about that because there's such a block in aftercare. And I'm sure you see this in the Army. Once the Army or the Coast Guard checks their box on what they need to do, these members are left to dry.
Yep.
And that is where the suicidal ideation comes in. When everybody else is moving on and these people are left dealing with their trauma, that is the most crucial time for them to receive care. And our military does not do that.
You would think after Vanessa Guillen and so many before her, and it's so sad that I have to say so many, but so many before her. You think afterwards that there would have been this realization that there is a problem within the force that needs to be addressed, and how we're going about it right now is not addressing the actual problem. It's just it's scratching the surface of saying, hey, we're aware something exists, but we're not actually attacking the problem.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time really pinpointing what could be the problem, because I think it's multiple problems, but I don't know which problem to attack first, if you will. Because one of the problems is obviously going to be the people in which you bring into your organization. And obviously, there's only so much we can do in vetting, and we don't want, we want to, as humanity, or being part of humanity, if you will, I want us to still have faith in each other to believe that we are all innately good. But having been in and having been where I've been and experienced some of the things I've experienced, I have a hard time in believing that we are all innately good, and I believe that most of us are innately bad. And it scares me because there is a level of bad out there that exists in the world that scares me. And I'm not afraid of a lot of things, but like there's a level of evil out there that scares me to the point where I'm like, it's filtrated into our military. And it, like you said, it's like you said, no one cares because everyone gets sold this ideology of like, you have to protect this crystal ball, which is your career. And if you do anything to damage that, well, good luck trying to put the pieces back together, because you're now going to be labeled as this thing for the rest of your
career. Label, the reputation.
Yep. And there's nothing you can do about it, because everywhere you go, there's always going to be someone who knows someone
that you were stationed with,
and they're going to be there to remind you that they're still there and you're still that thing, or they're still labeled that thing. And it's so terrible. And like, it was like I was telling you beforehand, a big part of the reason is why I am so ready to because with that issue, with that part of the military, but just so many other things, it's just, it's no longer, it's not what I thought it was. It's not what I used to want to hold the Army up to, the standard of like, okay, I've met great leaders, I've met great men, I've met great women, I've seen, we've heard the stories of all the great things that they've done, but unfortunately, the greats that I've heard about, they're no longer here. They're and
I know,
and it sucks, right? And so you're like, okay, I want to be that, but then you realize when to go to be that I didn't know that there were they were labeled just as bad as most of oh, you're a bad soldier, or you're this, you're that, right? And it's terrible. It's just terrible. I don't know. It's unimaginable, right? That what you had to go through, and it's shameful that the Coast Guard, couldn't get with their time, couldn't get with the times, right? And I say get with the times, but like as if it, like, this was like a new thing. But have the balls, stand up for the people, in your organization. Your people are what make up your organization. We're here for a reason.
And you know what truly matters is the view that your people underneath you have of you, and not what the higher ups should. Like, because that means you're sticking your neck out for your people. And that opinion is what lasts. I mean, trying to move through the ranks and not sticking your neck out for anybody, like, sure, you're going to be proud of that after your career, I guess. But what really you're going to be proud of is sticking up for the underdog.
Yeah.
For someone who doesn't have as much power as you. And it's really sad that so many people have forgotten that.
Yeah.
And I've been able to continue to keep a open, positive relationship with the Coast Guard because I am dedicated to helping them be better and to help these members. I have helped between 50 and 60 survivors so far.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I get contacted all the time. It's horrible. These members are dealing with and in the same situations that I was in a decade ago. And so I'm just really dedicated to creating something that is going to be safe for them and have resources. And a huge problem that I run into, just in my, like, even within my own situation, but with a lot of the other survivors, is that there is such a deep level of distrust against, like, their service. So when they want help that has nothing to do with their branch. Nothing that's affiliated. And I see that, and I want to be able to help with that. Offering third-party resources, offering a resource that makes them feel comfortable and makes them feel safe. And I believe that every one of our branches should be in support of third-party resources. And if they're not, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Because you should not be afraid of accountability if you're doing the right thing.
I have always said that I think that these programs in the military should be ran and operated by a non-military entity. I think I said this and I hold this belief because I do wholeheartedly think these programs are flawed. And I've openly said this to the individuals who are the representatives of those programs at my particular unit that I'm in at that time. And, they've asked me, inquired why and all these things. And I've told them, I said, listen, I consider myself lucky because mine was sexual harassment. And I said, but I was like, but again, most people look at me, I'm a buff black dude, right? So like, there's not like, so most people are like, hey, like, who would want to do anything to you or say anything to you? And I'm like, you're right. I was like, I'm very blessed to have the genes that I do. I said, but there are people who don't look like me, who don't have, or not me, and who don't feel as, who feel like they don't have the power. And I was like, and I said, I can only imagine what they went through. I said, going through it myself, I said, that was one of the worst times of my life I experienced. I said, and like I said, look at me, I know like mentally, physically, I'm pretty strong, right? I said, but there are people who are, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but we'll just go in this. I don't want to be demeaning, weaker than I am. I'm just trying to utilize a word here, but they're not as strong as I am, if you will, mentally or physically, and they're taken advantage of, and no one cares. And I was like, if I felt this way, I can only imagine what that person felt like over there. And you want me to, and you're supposed to sit your tongue to tell me, well, the program works, the program's this, the program that. No. I don't care about the program. The program is full of military members who have to also worry about that crystal ball that I was telling you. And the problem is the people who are usually get involved in these programs are only doing it because it keeps that crystal ball.
They put it on their marks.
Yes, exactly. That's it. That is it. There's no actual moral reason for them wanting to. There is for some, but they also understand, like, hey, look, I also get this. It's going to get NCR block here, and that's going to make sure I make 8, maybe even potentially make 9 one day. And so, like, that is all it is for. So remove it from the military, give it to a civilian entity, because now a civilian entity can come in there to sit there from the outside looking in and say, hey, this is messed up what y'all got going on here. Because you have people competing in these positions, but they're only competing in these positions to benefit them in their future, not because there's actual people who need their help. And I remember telling one of the guys where I'm currently stationed at, I was telling him about this, and I was like, it's nothing against you. I said, I do see that you do care. I said, but however, when you're done here, you're going to make 8. You are. You're going to make 8. And you're going to be really proud and you're going to have some things to look back on in this time. I said, but the people that, that the victims that you tried to help, or that sought your help, or whatever the case might be, they have to live with this forever. This was just a check the block for you, but this is a lifelong thing that they have to try to live with now. And this is the problem, because we put it in the military and left it with the military members and said, hey, make it a great program, do what you got to do. And it turned into what it was not supposed to be. And I
completely agree. And I cannot wait as what I'm doing formulates more, and I can share more about that, because I share the same views as you when it comes to that. And we all see it and have experienced that. And we are very dedicated on creating an environment outside of the ranking system. That it's just because so many people, I've seen so many people become victim advocates that should not be victim advocates, only to better their career and put it on their marks.
And oh man. And there's I remember talking to it's like you said, after after the military does what it needs to check the block or check, they're like, hey, we've done everything we were supposed to do, and they kind of leave you out to dry. I remember it was like 2 months later, my brigade victim advocate calls me in and says, hey, just want to talk to you, see how you're doing. I remember sitting down with her, and I'm talking to her, and she's not good at communication. She was not good at communicating.
Okay.
And it was kind of like, I'm like, okay, hey, so I'm just like, I'm telling her about some of the frustrations that I still have. I'm like, hey, there's some things that are unanswered for me. Like you guys told me kind of like, hey, he's getting a GOMAR and that's it. But I'm like, hey, like I have other questions. Like, what are other ramifications? Like, what does this look like? And she's like, well, let me talk to the brigade commander and I'll get back to you. You're supposed to be the person who knows. This is your lane. And couldn't give me an answer. And I never heard from her again. And
because they don't know how to think outside of that box.
Yes.
It is not on this paper that's like, oh, it's not under 12B or C. They don't know how to then go forth and find the information because it is not clearly set out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a tragedy, but you know, Meghan, I had several questions in my head, and I was gonna like rattle them off, but as you were talking, I was like, I don't want to interrupt. I was like, you know, like I need like it can't get worse, and sounds so terrible. It was getting worse, and I was like, no. Wait, you told one more person. Oh my gosh, this is the person that helped. No, they didn't help. Got it. Yeah. Don't tell anybody. In my head, I was like, don't tell anybody else. Don't tell anybody. You just keep it to yourself. Run away. I hide. I would do the same thing.
Yeah, it's really like being a 31-year-old woman now with the knowledge that I have and where everything that should have been different.
Yeah.
And the lack of education and just, and a lack of people that were willing to put their neck out, you know?
Yeah. And that's the crazy part is the lack of education. Like, cause they were told, like, hey, we educate these people. It's like, no.
Yeah.
We need more education. The education, cause it's one thing to know like who we can talk to. A different
form of education.
Yes. Yeah. Right. But it's another thing to know if a person does experience, who unfortunately have to go through that experience, guess what they're not going to be thinking about? Well, let me go talk to my victim advocate on Monday, and let me go tell them my story, right? They're not, no, they're in their heads like this, what just happened to me? And it's unfathomable that you're just like, oh, my phone's ringing again. Gosh dang, like my phone just never wants to turn off. And this is a job you signed up for. And it's just, guys, I just know, I'm going to say this once and only once because I'm still in, but I do hate the Army. Just know I hate the Army. Gosh, I hate the Army. That being said, I said it more than once, I know, but it felt good to say it. Meghan, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Like I said, I wanted the opportunity for you. I wanted you to have the opportunity to tell your story. Again, I know you've told your story so many times before, but I do appreciate you coming on my platform to share your story because there are a lot of people that I do follow me that are military, and you know, and I think for them they're still actively serving, to be able to hear from someone like you who have experienced these things to this extent, it's unfortunately, I think it's relatable to some of those people in the audience that haven't said anything. And, you know, there's a whole thing you could delve into, right? Of especially,
can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
You know, after leaving the service, I've been out for 9 years. The one thing that I am most proud about is that I didn't stop fighting.
Yeah.
Even though it made my life harder and I wore a label that I didn't deserve, and I constantly was in this state of like trying to work out of that and to prove myself that I was a hard worker and that I wanted to be there. But the number one thing that I hold on to that I am so proud of and that I can sleep at night because is that I fought for myself regardless of what people thought about me.
Yeah.
And that is going to stick with me for the rest of my life.
That's something that you can't teach somebody, to fight for themselves and to just to be a fighter. You can't, as weird as it sounds, you can't teach that. And because I say that because I know several people who like, they won't do it. They won't fight for themselves at all. They're like, nope, I'm let this person walk all over me. And I'll show up to work with a smile on my face every single day. And I said, and I'll be like, no, absolutely not. I was like, if you got to put boot to face, you got to put boot to face. Right. And like, because there's some people, I'm sorry, that just, they're not going to listen until they get a boot to the freaking face.
Yep, absolutely.
And so you have to fight, and they just refuse. And I'm like, I want to help you, but like, you got to want to help yourself first. You got to want to help yourself. And,
absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, I didn't become that person until my cup became full. And I was like, wait a minute. I don't have to put up with being treated like this anymore, you know? And I hope these people out there, I hope they find that. I really do.
Yeah.
Helps me sleep at night.
And that's the thing. You just want to be able to sleep at night. You know, when you're able to close your eyes at night and say, like, you know, I'm good, and like go to sleep. Look, I'm telling y'all, it's amazing sleep. It's amazing sleep.
Well, you know what else I think about is that one day I have to have a conversation with my sons about what happened to me, especially now that I've been so public about it. There's going to be a day where I have to have a conversation with them, but have a framed picture from the senator thanking me for my bravery for this country. And I'm able to tell my sons that I fought for myself, regardless of the evil that people did to me.
Yeah. That is, I want to ask one more question, because you do have sons. So would you allow your sons, and I say allow, I mean, obviously when they're 18, they can do whatever they want. However, / mom and dad are still in charge. So you can't do whatever you want as much as you think you do want to. Would you be okay with them joining the military?
As the military stands right now, no. I don't know if I would feel that they would be safe and protected. Yeah. Not with where the military's at now.
Mm-hmm. No, you know what? Look, we're gonna have to have another conversation, because we've already.
I think so. I could dive into that for a really long time.
We're gonna have to have another conversation, because and it will be on a different platform, because YouTube is interesting.
Yeah,
I love YouTube. We love you, YouTube. Thank you, YouTube, for everything you do.
So much. We're grateful for you.
You guys can find Mediocre Dads on Rumble, by the way. Just saying. That being said, Meghan, thank you so much for coming on, guys.
Yes.
All of her stuff, social media and everything, will be in the description below. Go check her out. I'm telling you guys, the moment you came up on the feed, and I was like, who is this person? I need to know more. And I was sawing more. I was like, I need to talk to this person. So like, y'all, like, I'm telling y'all, it's great. I love this conversation. And if y'all made it to this point of the podcast, you know, one, I do appreciate it. Two, good you made it to this point, because I think you're all going to, because I think it's going to be a thing where you're going to be like, you're just like, you're so invested. You're like, I need to know what happened next. I need to know what happened next. Not because you want to see something evil happen to somebody, but you're just kind of like, you can't leave it at the middle and just be like, hey, well, you know, that's all I got for you. You'd be like, no, what happened?
That's so sad.
You know, yeah. It's like, oh no, that's so sad. But what happened next? You know, like,
but what happened?
You tell me. You can't stop. So you got to tell me more. As a society, I think we're a little messed up. We're all a little messed up in the head, guys. We like sad stories, and I don't know why. But that being said, Meghan, again, I'm sorry. Thanks for joining us. Hey, guys, it's been great. Of course, I'll say this: the merchandise Obedience Demands Action is available on mediocredads.net. Go get you some. Go check it out. And as I say, guys, being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. I got it right. That's all I got. Mediocre Dads out.
Bye.